I don't believe in this achieving a work-life balance. You never achieve it. It's always going to be a balancing act. One day you're going to be the better mom. One day you're going to be the better lawyer. You know, that's it just has to be that way because some things just take precedent over others.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I am your host, Megan Henry, and today I am joined by, my co-host, Wendy Smith, and as well as Nicole Pielli, who is just a fantastic attorney and, has an amazing story. She's now general counsel of First Tech, but she did not get to that role without a lot of hard work and grit and determination and doing it all as a single parent. So I have so much respect for her and everything that she's done to get where she is now. And she just has an amazing story. So I know you'll appreciate listening to it. So with that, I'll bring her in. Hey, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us this morning on The Defense Never Rests. How are you?
I'm well. It's great to see faces, even online. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to have you on here. You and I had talked a few weeks ago about doing this podcast, and and it's kind of coming on the ducktails as I just did a podcast about the challenges of gender and diversity, gender bias in the workplace and diversity. And I feel like we're going to talk about all things like women related kind of today, and it kind of ducktails right into that podcast. So the timing of this is really, really perfect, at least in my eyes. But before we dive into, the meat of it, I want to talk about you because you and I had just a wonderful conversation. I think it was even hard for us to get off the phone. And I think you just have such an interesting and awesome background. So we can't get into the meat of it without talking about you. So you're currently the general counsel of First Tech, which is kind of, if I understand correctly, it's kind of like an IT company, right?
Yes, we call it a fintech, so financial technology.
Okay.
But heavier on the technology than anything else.
So, but your background getting there is kind of interesting, I think. So, just by way of background, like you went to law school, and if I remember correctly, you were like a single mom during law school, right?
I got pregnant in my last year, and my entire last year was my entire pregnancy. I took the bar 3 weeks after having my daughter.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, good for you, but that must have been so challenging. I mean,
I don't recommend it.
How did you stay awake when you took the bar? I had trouble myself.
I was a heavy coffee drinker to begin with, and I had to scale down to 4 cups a day. It was a lot of caffeine.
So, I mean, but even I remember that time when my kids were like three weeks old. I mean, I wasn't even sleeping. I don't know how you could retain the information and be ready in that like test taker mindset to be able to sit for, a 2-day exam.
It was physically, mentally, and emotionally painful, honestly. But my thing was, I better do it, or else if I don't do it, in my mind, we're in this pregnancy brain, and it kind of makes your emotions a little more, heightened than they would normally be. But in my mind, it was, if I fail, this baby is not going to bode well. This is not going to go okay. So it was do it or else. And when you put yourself under that kind of pressure, you'd be surprised to pull off.
And I mean, obviously, I think everyone goes into the bar exam like you have to pass, but you had such an added pressure on you. Not only do I need to pass because I have this family I need to provide for. This baby is depending on me, so I can practice and bring in an income.
I call my daughter the bar baby. She came at a very inconvenient time, but she's also my number one motivator. Yes, everyone wants to do well. Of course, I want to be a great practitioner. Of course, I want to be a great attorney. And I want to do better and better with each coming year that I learn. I am a rather younger general counsel. And so, of course, I want to excel. But really, my number one motivator is I have a daughter. I think it would be different for me if it was a son. But the fact that I have a daughter who's watching, and who's taking cues about the expectations of women and what women can do or should do, and what kind of professions women can lead, when they have children. That's really important to me. What she sees is really important to me. So
Yeah.
again, do it or else.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I have two daughters, and it's really important for them to see, you know, me doing it, like my job and my career. And I don't care what career they have, but I think it's just important for them to see. And when Wendy, you and I had talked about this too, like you grew up with your mom as a single mom, and I'm sure you looked at her and and all the work that she was doing and were appreciated that.
And my mom worked 2 jobs to put both my brother and I through college. So it's like you go from your 9 to 5 job and then you
Wow.
scarf down some food and you go on to your next job. But she always stressed that education was extremely important, which, that's a motivation, for me, like when I went to college, I'm like, she's trying to do her best to help. So I'm not going to be the kid that's goofing off and sleeping in and not going to class and things like that. And then, when it comes to law school, it's like, I'm footing the bill completely on this and, make this count. Nicole, I have a question for you. Because you knew that you were going to have a
Sure.
child, did that kind of dictate what type of job you were looking for out of law school? Or were you still that mindset? Like a lot of us are like, we pass the bar, whatever jobs sometimes are slim or scarce. We're going to take the job that's available to us.
It was a little bit of both, but not in the way you're probably thinking. So, yes, chasing the higher income becomes way more important than it was before. Like at first, you're motivated by student loans. I was motivated by student loans and child. That said, however, I also understood fairly early on that my hours would be insane. If I decided to go straight into big law or straight into something larger, I would not, I'd have a baby that I'd never see. And in fact, later on in my career, I had a toddler I never saw. And I realized that then the hard way. So part of it was get whatever I can get. And I knew it was going to take me to come into stride. I was still waiting on my bar license. I was still, trying to figure out the routine with this baby. When should I put her in daycare? It was important to me to nurse. That was a big deal. And the opportunities weren't there to be able to do that during the day, even if they are, legally supposed to be. So there were a lot of factors. I ended up working for Planned Parenthood, not in a legal capacity. I was actually a project coordinator, but really had the functions more of a contracts manager because I had a legal background. And that gave me a little bit of flexibility in my hours. My hours were set, and there weren't nights the way I do now, or the longer hours that you'd expect in the legal profession. But that also came at a cost of my salary wasn't very high
Yeah.
at all. So the first 2 to 3 years of my daughter's life, we were broke. I made bills, but that's about it. There was no savings. There was no retirement fund. There was none of it. We got by, but I got to spend time with her. I got to do the mommy things. I got to have a routine with her. We had traditions. We did Halloween. We did things I don't believe I would have been able to do if I had gone straight for the big money job.
Yeah.
And I think that's the myth. Like people think like, oh wow, you went to law school. I go to schools and I talk to kids and it's like I say, how many people in this room, these it could be high school kids, sometimes it could be college kids. It's like how many people in this room think that lawyers make a lot of money? And everybody shoots their hand up. Everybody puts their hand up. And I'm like, I'm gonna tell you something. I said I was fortunate to get a job offer. I was actually taking my last exam of law school. It was a take-home exam. I had a break. So I was extremely excited that I had a job. A little bit of more pressure because you have to make sure you have to pass the bar. And but when I got out, your student loans, they don't stay on hold. I lived at home for a little while, but the commute was killing me because, I'm working, if I'm on trial, I would take the last train home and then come right back first thing in the morning. So then you had to factor in rent. And for the first couple of years, I worked 2 jobs. I was a face painter. I worked for a friend who had worked for a party company. And on the weekends, I painted faces, corporate parties and birthday parties and picnics. And people are like, you did what? And I'm like, yeah, needed some extra cash.
Wow, I never knew that about you.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a secret talent. I can paint faces.
Yeah, I took on a second job too as a grant writer for like a grant writing consulting company, and I could do that from anywhere. That was remote work. I didn't have to be in an office, so that was great. Because at Planned Parenthood, I did have to be in an office. So I
Yeah.
went to my office job. I'd pick up my, my baby at the time, 8 or 9 months old, feed her, bathe her, play with her, put her to bed, and then at night is when I would do my grant writing. But that was a way to make extra cash. And then the other odd thing I've done was to join the lab and become a panelist. They pay you to basically be a lab rat. You test products, and that was a way to cover the odds and ends. I lived to tell the tale. I couldn't have been that bad. But yeah, you do things that you have to do to get by.
I'm just curious about that. Like, so it's an offshoot, but when you were testing products, like anything like that you tested that was terrible, or like you're like, this is the best new thing, and you got to be like a little guinea pig with the products, like.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing is there are some of the things you come to like, but you have no idea what they are. They don't tell you what it is you're testing, right? So let's say it's a face cream. They'll tell you it's a face cream, because they need your face as a test site, but you don't know what brand it is. You don't know, there's no markings on the packaging. You have no idea what it is. And so if it ever makes it to market, you wouldn't even know where to find it if you wanted to buy it.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, and also like they're losing a really good portion of like clientele. Like, you love this product. You gave us great reviews. Can you let me know what it is now? Like, I understand not telling you when you're testing it, but afterwards, like, by the way, you use Neutrogena. Like,
I tried every which way. I used to make friends with the nurses. Like, please, I won't tell anyone. Let me know. And no, I think ethically they just can't do it. So, which is fine. Yeah, I'll find it eventually. It'll be like, it's kind of like sending out a message in a bottle, hopefully the bottle comes back. So it's kind of like that. Hopefully the product will return. But going back to your point, Wendy, I completely understand the misconception about attorneys being flush with cash. The other misconception is that attorneys, can do things that they want to do, humanitarian wise, like they can be the attorneys for the good cause, and they choose. I really wish we had that, to younger attorneys in the profession. It's not that we don't want to do the great, wonderful things about, changing the world for the better that we dreamed of when we went into law school. It's that some of us are financially constrained from doing that. Mm-hmm. And the ones that get to do the public service work, a lot of the time are people that can afford to do the public service work. So being a first generation college grad and then a first generation law student, my family still has a lot of misconceptions about my profession and how well I'm doing and how long it took me to get to where I'm at and why that might be, and yada yada yada. And wouldn't I love to do more of that, fighting the good fight, particularly in civil rights, because I come from a Puerto Rican family. It's a big deal to have an attorney in the family, and so some of them are like, you sold out to the corporate world. Yes and no. I do the things I believe in my spare, but there needs to be a talk about attorneys and financial wealth. They don't always go hand in hand, particularly those of us that didn't come from it to begin with.
Yeah, and that's such a good point too. I mean, because I think I was guilty of thinking that attorneys make a ton of money when I was going into law school, and and there's some that do, but I remember when I was coming out, I was like, I had no, like I summered at a place that they're like, sorry, we can't take any summer associates, so that I was at square one. And then the salaries at the places I was looking at was not those big law salaries. I was like, wait a minute, like this is I didn't know about this part. So I think there needs to be a little bit more education on that. But also to your point about like giving back and fighting the good fight. I mean, I think there's other ways to do it too. Like even if you work in corporate America, or you work for a large firm or a medium-sized firm, like our firm, like we still do a lot of civil, projects and community service projects to help out. So I think you could still do the good fight, even if it's not necessarily like you're an attorney for a nonprofit or something like that. You could still help.
That's what we just started doing. It's actually 10 years. It's been 10 years ago. I can't believe this. the Philadelphia Bar Foundation, a little plug to them, and the Young Lawyers Division came up with a program to try to get young lawyers, particularly young lawyers. You get your first job, be it your corporate law, you're at an insurance defense law where you have the billable hours, or plaintiffs, whatever. People tend to just get very closed in within their four walls of their office or now their homes. And there's still the Bar Foundation has all of these, non-profit legal services. And then we actually extended it out further, but it gives people like young lawyers, an opportunity to go out there and just do some work with nonprofit boards and get that feel for it, to get them out of those four walls and get into the community. So we're trying to build programs like that to help people, so when you are working all these jobs, there is that part that you can do some humanitarian work.
Yeah. So we got a little sidetracked. I want to hop back in because when you mentioned that you were taking the bar and you have a 3-week-old daughter, and it was very important for you to nurse her, like, were there any accommodations made for you so you could pump or you could do anything during the bar exam? Because also this was 2 years ago. I feel like they're not even there now, and I can't imagine how they were 10 years ago or so, or whenever you were taking the bar. Like, did they have any accommodations for you?
So I actually took 2 state bars at once because at the time, this is predate, the UBE wasn't a thing back then, right? So if you wanted to take bar, the best you could do to be licensed dually, at the same time would be to take 2 bars that are compatible with each other. So I took Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I went to law school in Pennsylvania. So I figured, okay, I have no idea where I'm going next. Let me see what I can do here. I did Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Pennsylvania did provide accommodation with a physician. So I note about why I wanted to nurse and how this would help the health of my new child. And they then put me in a room separate with all of the other people who got accommodations for various reasons. We weren't all nursing mothers. In fact, I was the only nursing mother in the room. I think the rest of the people in the room with me were men. But we were the accommodation group. Right? And each of us had a specific accommodation to us, by the way. Some people had extra time. Some people had learning disabilities. Some people did whatever. My accommodation was I had up to 45 minutes. I did not have to use it consecutively. I could break up my 45 minutes and I could stop the clock at any time in the exam. I would bring my pump and my bottles, and they had to be inspected both before and after. I would be escorted to a kind of like a disabled person's restroom, like the wheelchair accessible kind, but it had an outlet so I can plug in my pump. Somebody would be waiting outside for me. I would sit in there and, do my pump my milk, do my business, put everything back in the packet with the ice pack, walk out, have them look at it, be escorted back into the room, have the proctor look at it again, and then they would take my things from me. I could stop the clock for however long I was out, come back in, and then the time that I was out that I used for pumping would be added to the end of the section I was working on. And that was the accommodation for Pennsylvania, which I was very grateful for. For New Jersey, where I took the second bar, there were no accommodations at all. There was no doctor's note or not. They wouldn't do anything about it. They said, you can certainly take bathroom breaks on your time if that's what you need. So, I wasn't going to lose time. Yeah. It was agonizing because if you don't express milk, like your chest hurts, like it was physically appealing, and just to relieve the pressure when we were all dismissed, and just like literally just started to like squeeze my chest into a toilet so that I could just relieve some of that pressure that was there. Got through it. It was hard. I really wish that they had accommodations in New Jersey. I hope that they've changed it since. I honestly haven't looked into it, but I'm sure I'm not the only woman that's ever either been pregnant or recently given birth and then taken a bar exam. I've read about several of them.
Well, and it just goes like, it's right off the bat, you're already being put at a disadvantage. Even the accommodations you got in Pennsylvania, like 45 minutes is not a ton of time for all those steps that you had to take. you know, like that you had to do a lot in that time.
Yeah.
And, you know, so and in like New Jersey, it puts you at, or any woman who, you know, is lactating and breastfeeding, and you don't even have to be a new mom. Some people breastfeed till the kids are 2 years old. You know, it already puts you at a disadvantage to like you're taking a test that's, you know, your job depends on you passing, and you're distracted because you're in pain. You know you're already behind the rest of the group.
I mean, people ask me, "Oh, how was the bar exam?" And honestly, I tell them it was a blur. I don't remember the essays I wrote. I don't remember what I typed. I don't, I don't remember the questions. You know, I was there, but I was kind of on autopilot, to be honest. I can't remember much of the bar exam I took, other than to tell you it was hard, because that's what everyone thinks of the bar. It wasn't easy.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I will say,
yeah, it's just a distant memory.
yeah, I don't remember any of the essays I wrote either. I remember finishing the bar and be like, I think I did good enough. so, um, so, so you're at Planned Parenthood, which was a good fit for you at the time, although not a great compensation fit. And then you eventually you moved on. So, you know, what was the next step that you took, and did you get into more of a legal role after you left Planned Parenthood?
Yes, so I gradually got into more and more of a legal role until I felt comfortable enough. I made really good friends with the CFO at Planned Parenthood, and it was called Planned Parenthood Mohawk Hudson. It was in upstate New York. I was living in Albany, working in Schenectady, New York at the time. So that was another barrier. I moved to a state where I didn't take a bar and I wasn't licensed yet. I made CFO. The CFO was great friends with me. She left Planned Parenthood and moved on to a health network called Alliance for Better Health, and raised my salary about 50% if I went with her. She had the purview to do that. Obviously, that was a deal I couldn't refuse. I took off running, and I became the privacy officer, the HIPAA privacy officer for this health network that had about 2,000 providers within it. And then I was tasked with maintaining their policies, developing their policies, training them under a project in New York at the time called DISRIP, which was a that they were trying. It was a pilot program. And people were just trying to understand life under DISRIP. And that came with a lot of new rules and regs and a lot of, you know, new protocols to follow. So my responsibility was to guide this a PPS, so it's like a service network, under the state project, and also drive some of their underlying measurables and deliverables on data all the time. It was a 5-year project, and if they did well, they'd add another 5 years, and this was, you know, billions of dollars to go around. So everyone in the upstate region wanted in. It was challenging. It was great, and it tested my ability as someone who can analyze, you know, rules and regs and give that sort of advice and give that sort of guidance in a way that's understandable to others. Take something complex and make it simple. That was my job. And I grew to really like that. I then ended up taking the New York bar since I figured I'm going to be here a while. My daughter was then 2 years old. And believe it or not, I think the second bar was more challenging than the first. It was full-time job, full-time 2-year-old, and study for the bar on your own time, a couple of years out of school at this point, so nothing's fresh.
Yeah.
That was actually harder. But, you know, passed, took it, and said, okay, I'm going to be a licensed attorney, and I'm going to do this now. And then I ended up, once the project was coming to an end, I was sort of growing out of it, I ended up going to Deloitte.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I definitely want to talk about Deloitte, because I mean that's a giant, you know, accounting firm, and are definitely known not to have the most work life. Not just Deloitte, just as a whole. The big four accounting firms are known, kind of like the big law firms, not to be the most accommodating to families. And so you're going into that experience being a single mom with a young child. So, you know, how was that experience there for you? Because it is cutthroat. I mean, I think that is the best way to describe it, at least from my view, is that when you're there, it is cutthroat.
I have to note that I was very naive. That's just objectively very naive about what I was going into. And this is the part where I start to chase the money, right? This is the part where I'm like, you know what? I need to do better. I need to do bigger. My kid needs, I need to start saving up for her. If something happens, I need a life insurance policy. I need X, Y, and Z. And this is where I start to think, okay, I got very confident in, the smaller upstate New York region where I was working. I had obviously proven to myself that I could pull this off. My best friend is a CPA and a manager at Deloitte. We grew up together as kids, and she's someone that I talk to often. Great professional, but she doesn't have children. So, we're both working with factors about one another. Manager at Deloitte, she doesn't know what it's like to be a mother, but we're piecing it together and we're going to make it work. So it was on her recommendation and her word, essentially, that I ended up scoring the interview with very little tax law experience. They didn't seem to mind. They were looking for lawyers because they were working with FATCA and CRS, which are relatively newer sets of laws and regs with newer reporting standards. And they needed more legal professionals to help navigate through FATCA and CRS alongside their CPAs. We also have power of attorney, and we can squabble with the IRS while the CPAs do the reporting work. So lawyers were needed, and they were willing to train. Deloitte is a wonderful place to work, particularly when you're younger and you're agile and you have the energy. The level that I came in at, parent, my level, and that made it difficult for people to really understand that facet. Mostly the other people who were parents were higher up. They were managers or PPMDs or senior managers. They were higher up, and a lot of them had nannies and au pairs and all that, which is wonderful. If you can afford that sort of lifestyle, that works out for them. That was not my lifestyle. I didn't travel internationally, but I traveled to other states. I had to go to Houston back and forth quite a bit. Deloitte will help you in the sense that they will concierge your entire life. And this is something I didn't realize until I got there. And this is true about big law as well, from what I've come to understand. I had a nanny. Like they subsidized a nanny for times that I had to overnight somewhere or work late during busy season or travel. And all I paid for this nanny was $6 an hour, and they subsidized the rest. Like, it was a crazy awesome benefit to have.
That is a pretty awesome benefit.
Often. Right. So they tried. The health insurance benefits were top notch. They subsidized nannies. They would send your dry cleaning out. They'd send you home in an Uber if you were working late. If you worked, a certain amount of hours in the day, your meals were comped. They tried to help. So I really attribute this more to my own naivety throughout culture. It's cutthroat in the sense of the people on your team who don't have children and who expect you to be available 24/7. They don't get it, and they will not be flexible with you. The company itself tries, right? And they take the initiatives to give you benefits that will help you along and be a good employee. This is before COVID. I really wish I would have stuck it out at times, because COVID seemed to teach my team that I'm still in touch with just about everyone. But COVID really taught the department about flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Ta-da! 1 year of everyone having to work from home. And suddenly there's all this flexibility that I was desperately in need of. I had a 3-year-old, and law licenses to upkeep, and CLEs to do, and I needed to be home more than I needed to be in the office at that time. I had a nanny, but the idea of having a nanny raise my daughter for me is just not an idea that I was comfortable with. After putting in all this work to have this child and give her everything, that I needed to give her me too.
Yeah.
There was flexibility there that was lacking. And it's a little frustrating now, because now suddenly everybody works from home whenever they want. Yeah. Everyone, understands. People put on away messages like, I'm not available at 4 p.m. I'm taking my kids to soccer practice. I would have never seen that when I was working there from anyone. Yeah. Even the PPMDs would not be that open to explain that they were taking some of their own time and will get back to you once they're done with their kids.
Yeah.
It was just a new concept.
Yeah, I definitely think COVID helped in that way. I mean, I think it helped everybody to be a little bit more flexible and open about their time and their things. Like just like today, like when we got on the podcast, Wendy was saying like she was running late because she had to be at her condo because and she had to deal with the doors and this and that. Like I think pre-COVID, like I mean, I wouldn't have personally cared if Wendy had to deal with her condo and her doors and stuff. But I think it's like it's more acceptable to come on to a meeting with a client or a contemporary at your office or whatever and be like, sorry, like I was at Home Depot. I had to like go and run and do this. Like this morning I had to run to the DMV, and it's just like, okay, I'm just not going to be able to log in until 10 o'clock. And that's okay. I think that's become a little bit more normalized now than it was, a year and a half ago. But
absolutely. And I'm grateful.
Yeah. What I wanted to touch on, because when you mentioned your colleagues, like you had colleagues that without, didn't have children and were able to or expected you to be available. Like, I think, Wendy, you're kind of on the flip side. Like, I think sometimes people demand your time because they don't respect that you have your own personal time, even though you don't have children. They like think, oh, like, well, Wendy should be available, when in reality your time is your time and you can use it however you want. But I think, your time people might take advantage of your time. Have you experienced that?
I think it's something where I don't know if it's necessarily because a lot of people don't know whether you're married, you have kids or not. But I think it also comes with the territory of what we do. And in this particular job, when I'm running a department. So it's like today, I'm dealing with this door issue, but I have a client call. I take it. Like I'm always accessible. But what the flip side of that is, like you say, you go on vacation, you put your out of office on, and then someone calls yourself, because you always give out cell phone to clients to make myself available. They'll call you, and then you're like, oh, I didn't realize you were on vacation. But then they keep talking. It's not like they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you're on vacation. I'll catch you when you're there. They keep talking. And you know what? I've just been doing this for so long. I'm used to it, and I'm used to, Megan, I'm texting you in between my flights to the airport to deal with some issues. That's just comes with the territory. But it makes it hard. It's always kind of like that balance. Like, hey, I need time to actually go and take care of something versus, people will expect a response right away.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is like setting up your own boundaries for it too. And, if you like, you're like, I'm just not going to take a call right at this very moment because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. But it's hard too, because when, like, especially in the client services industry, like you want to serve your clients, you want to take their call because you want them to continue to be your client. so there is a tug and pull with that, I think. But I don't know. I feel like I've witnessed some people get their time taken advantage of when they have the extra time. And I personally don't think that's fair. I think, like, even though I have kids, or Nicole, you have kids, and we have those time constraints, I think, my time outside the office is just as valuable when I spend it with my kids as anyone else's when they spend it, with their significant other or just on their own, if they're friends, like whatever it may be. Like, I think everyone's time is valuable. So, Nicole,
I noticed that with my best friend.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure it's like you have like kind of complete opposite home lives in a way, but then you have a similar professional life.
Exactly.
I mean, I remember early on in my career, like not in my prior career before I was a lawyer, like I worked for a consulting firm, and I traveled like quite a bit, and I would be gone for, the whole week in Arizona, and I would go every other week. And to me at that age, that was great, because I had nothing else going on, and it was, it was an expense account, and it was fun. But now I couldn't do that. That just wouldn't work well for me. But
I had to tell that to a company once. I had to say this before, and this is before I went to law school. I took 3 years off. I had to say that, what was my next position going to be? Like, what would be the next step? And they said, oh, well, it's great because you're young and you're single. And what they did, they were these consultants that would go. I work for a hotel consultation company. So you wanted to go to like, Hilton's, and you go to Hilton's like all over. They even had international ones. And, you're looking at quality control, but they're only home like 2 weekends out of the month. And that would mean that I would never see my friends and my family. I'd only have the 2 weekends to just kind of take care of what I needed to at home and then pack my suitcase and go back. And I said, even I knew that at a young age, like, even though I'm single, I don't have kids, that's not the life I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it works for some people and not for all. And some of it is like speaking up to yourself and to others about what's working for you. And if it's not working for you and that company is not going to be able to make a change, then you need to find a new company.
Or you go to law school.
Yeah. So Nicole, so you're at Deloitte for a year and a half, and you switched over to work for a law firm right at like in March of 2020. So that was interesting timing in retrospect.
Yes.
Probably at the time you didn't.
I was gonna say. Yeah, you see, I have a theme here, right? My timing is always impeccable. When to have a baby, when to switch job. I do very well. So yes, I moved out of New York City. Again, the hustle and bustle with a small child was a lot. The lack of flexibility at this, wonderful accounting firm that I was working for, it had all the bells and whistles except that one thing I really needed. That was a lot for me. So I picked up and I moved to New Jersey. I'm licensed there. I'll make a go of it. I ended up working for a smaller law firm, and that's part of why I figured, okay, I can do this because it's not big law. I didn't feel like I was jumping from frying pan to fire. It was a smaller firm. And they toted their flexibility. I mean, that's the one thing I walked in. I learned from Deloitte how to ask for what I need ahead of time. You can't ask for it once you're already embroiled in the position. That doesn't work as well. Might work for some. It did not work for me. So I learned, I'm like, okay, my next job right off the bat during the interview is when I'm going to bring this up. Hey, I have a small child. My job's important, but so is my parenthood. And I need this in order to be a better employee. I need a little flexibility. I'll give you all the hours you need. I just can't, be chained to my desk in order to give them to you. I need a little bit of wiggle room. So I mentioned that immediately, thinking that that's the way to go. And if it's not compatible, you move on. Okay. The firm sort of tooted we have, we work 9 to 5 sharp. Like it's, if once you're here and you train up a little, then there is remote work available. We do this is essentially what I was told.
Wait a minute, a law firm actually told you that there was a 9 to 5 job? 9 to 5.
Yeah.
After we are off this podcast, I would like you to tell me what that law firm is. There's no such thing.
Yeah, tell me about it. Again, little naive.
Also a theme.
I started.
Sometimes Nicole goes into positions a little naive.
Also a theme. Little naive. Yeah, timing is wild, and I sometimes believe what I'm told. So I start there, and I think it was not even 2 weeks after I started, we were under a shutdown in New Jersey, like the whole state. You weren't allowed to go anywhere, even if you wanted to. So the first 2 months at this firm, I was alone in my house, trying to learn the ropes using like a share drive, and on the phone with another associate who had been there a few months and was trying to teach me the ropes. So it made it harder, and it also made it harder to really connect with my new colleagues. By the time I had met the founding shareholder who was supposed to be one of my direct bosses, I think I had been at the firm for, I don't know, 6 months or so before I ever met her in person. Right? It's like, oh, hi, hi, I'm Nicole. I've been working for you for 6 months straight, but it's nice to meet you. It was weird. So that definitely made things a little bit tougher. And obviously the 9 to 5 was not entirely accurate. And neither was the flexibility. We had to snow day. We had a really bad snowstorm, and we were told that if we didn't come into the office, that we would get docked a day. And that was the day that I decided this place isn't for me.
Yeah.
So I worked there about a year. I finished up everything in as far as my client files, there was nothing that was left open or loose. I trained a few of the law clerks. One of them got his license, and he was just a very sharp young attorney, fresh out of school, but a very quick study, very capable, very smart. I ended up writing a few of his recommendation letters when he went ahead and moved on. But he was the one that took over all my files, and I prepared him well before I ever put in my notice. I'm like, look, I'm not saying I'm leaving. I'm not saying I'm staying, but you should really know about these files. And this is my client load, and I would really appreciate if you got familiar with it. And taught him everything I know. Even if a place isn't working out for me, those are still relationships. You have to be careful about what bridges you burn. And the bridges that I've ever burned, I've burned very intentionally, and it was through a calculated process. And is this going to bite me later? Is this going to be something I regret?
Yeah.
If it isn't, then it isn't. If there's no value in that relationship, that's one thing. But for the most part, try to leave a place better than you found it. Right? Even if it doesn't work out, even if it's not your place, leave it better than you found it. And so that's been a practice of mine. And I will try to tie up all my loose ends, organize my file. My files are never more organized than when I'm getting ready to leave a job, honestly. And then I tend to write a big letter to everyone, just sort of highlighting all of the people along the way that I met in that position that were wonderful. Try not to say anything negative. The people that were they deserve shout outs, and I just found that they were underappreciated. They were incredible people. Everyone should know how incredible they are. And so I've written some pretty funny goodbye letters that sort of recap my time there.
I kind of love that. I've never had that, like I've never seen that happen. And I wish I did. Because I think it's great.
But that's the reason I do it, because I don't see it happen either. I think a lot of time employers really underestimate how far a thank you can go. Like, hey, I see you. I see what you're doing. I noticed you did X and Y and Z, and that was more than you were tasked to do. It's beyond your job description. I appreciate that you did that. Or, hey, I see that you're mentoring, the younger law clerks or the younger professionals that just came in. Thank you so much for doing that. Like, clearly we don't have a training program, so it's great that they have somebody that they can learn from.
Yeah.
Something. It's for me that even that little bit of appreciation, particularly in a COVID world where everybody was so stressed and so taxed and so overworked and so confused because suddenly people were working from home all the time. A little bit of that appreciation goes really far. And it actually, I've learned, or I've noticed it really does get me a lot of rapport. I've made some great friends by just telling somebody, even if it's someone I didn't work with personally, hey, I know that you did that. I think that's really cool. I appreciate that you did that.
Yeah, when people listen to this, that's a lesson that they need to learn, because people will say, I think people, when they hear like exit interview at jobs and stuff, they take it the opposite way. They say, oh, exit interview, this is my chance to tell these people what I really think about them and all the stuff that I don't like about the job. And I'm like, that is not what you do. And I don't think people understand that about keeping those relationships intact.
Yeah, I don't complain in my exit interview unless I think it's going to change something.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like when I left Deloitte, one of the partners asked me for an exit interview. We didn't have to do one, but he asked me for one because he knew that I was struggling with the home work life balance. And I was very honest with him. I said, look, you have an incredible team. I have never worked with smarter people in my life. I mean, the lights can be left on with brain power alone. These people are brilliant. You have an incredible team. You just need a little flexibility and to really understand that not everyone who rolls through here is a young 20-something who's trying to prove themselves. Some of us have a little bit of work experience in a different field and have families and are trying to scale. So, if it's a criticism that I think will lead to something positive for everyone else after I'm gone, absolutely throw it out there. try to be nice about it. You don't have to show your fangs, but throw it out there. Otherwise, it's just, I really appreciate you. It's been so wonderful working with you. Here's my number. Please stay in touch with me. If you think of me for anything in the future, if you need anything, great. I made more friends that way than not. And a lot of the people from my previous firm who shared, some of my criticisms of that firm, they've all since left, and we're all now a network of attorneys that works with one another. And every time one of us has a client or an idea or something, we will pitch it to each other, and I check in with them all the time. So now I've got attorneys spread out all throughout New Jersey because they've all gone to different firms, and I have a little network going on.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Yeah. It's working for me. I think that's the way to go.
And I mean, that is exactly the point, though. Like you don't want to burn the bridges, because then you just kill part of your network, and you just never know what people are going to do, what you're going to do, like what you might need, what they might need. Like it is a good way to keep those relationships going, not burn those bridges. And like you said, unless it is one that you want to burn in a calculated sense. So I want to get to First Tech though, because you and I were talking about this, you're now general counsel of not a small company,
I know.
and I mean, and you said earlier, you're not old, like you're pretty young, so
not yet.
I mean, we're all getting older, but but you said this earlier, like, I am a young general counsel, and so and I'm sure people listening are wondering, like, so how'd you do it, Nicole? Like, how did you go from you start basically at Planned Parenthood, scraping by, you go through some cutthroat, working for Deloitte, and that it's a totally different experience, to firm life. Now you're general counsel of a company. So how did that work out for you?
It helped that we were in the middle of a pandemic, because the pandemic taught me, some valuable lessons. One is, know what you want before you ask for it. Right. And so I had to have a very honest conversation with myself. I see that my career is really varied. Like, I looked at my own resume and I'm like, oh my God, whoever's looking at this resume is going to think that I have professional ADD. Like, this is just, my resume is all over the place. I have a very varied career. And now, if I want to scale up in this next phase of my career, I'm going to have to get a little more focused. And that means know what the heck you want out of it. Now it's not a matter of survival anymore. I have figured out how to have a career, maintain a child, raise my baby, who's not such a baby anymore. She's now in school and she talks back. I've sort of figured out what I'm doing with myself here. And so that desperation that I had 6 or 7 years ago, I don't have anymore. So now I can focus on, what do I need? Where do I need to be? And that was an important conversation to have before I quit the law firm I was at before. I started to sort of brainstorm what I was looking for. The other thing was, to understand that there is, at least so far, in my opinion, I have not seen this work, where you get the high-powered, crazy high-paying career and the family. I am not convinced that women can do it all. I'm going to still try. I'm still going to, I'm going to keep it up. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep telling my girl that we can. But in the real world, I am not convinced that is a possibility. There are days, but I'm a wonderful mother. And then there are days where I'm lacking as a mom, but man, did I kill my job today.
Thank you,
you can't have it all. And I need
Thank you. I applaud you, because you have just said what I've been telling women for a long time, and I'm not a mom, and I'm like, I don't believe in this achieving a work-life balance. You never achieve it. It's always going to be a balancing act. One day you're going to be the better mom. One day you're going to be the better lawyer. It just has to be that way, because some things just take precedent over others.
That's the truth. Yeah. And we need to dispel with telling people that you can have it all, because you're doing them a disservice. And so for the longest time, being under the impression that I could do everything, I had to fall hard on my butt and learn that I can't. And so that was something that I needed to tell myself before trying and throwing my hat in for this job. And so I saw the listing, thought it was bad. I'm like, man, general counsel, geez, like, but what could be bad? What's the worst that could happen? They'll tell me no. All right. That's about what happens with every guy I've ever had a crush on. It's not the worst thing. I could live, and so, rejection's okay. At least you tried. I'd rather rejection than no answer. So I went for it, and sure enough, I got the interview. I think it's because I probably lowballed myself on the salary. So I'm making the most money I've ever made professionally, but I still think I've lowballed it. But I also think that that's to my advantage, because that enabled me to then leverage that and say, look, I'm not going to rake you on the salary request, but I am going to demand some flexibility, and I am going to demand some work from home, and I'm going to demand, these number of days off because I have to do this and this that I know of so far. And I'd like CLEs and I'd like X and Y. And so that gave me the flexibility to ask for what I really wanted. I also learned that it's not all about the salary. And that's something that a lot of people forget. I had a really high salary at Deloitte and no flexibility. And you know what? It really wasn't worth the salary to me. So knowing that, I can say, okay, I need this much to be comfortable, pay my bills, have a savings, put some away, have the 529 plan that I'm contributing to for Sarah. Like, I do what I need to do as a responsible adult financially, but I don't need the extras. I need flexibility. That for me is my extra. And for everyone, the extra, it might be different, but you need to know what it is. And I think COVID taught us how to ask for it. Like we were talking about boundaries. For me, that's a boundary. Being able to set those boundaries down and say, I'm an attorney and I'm your employee, but I'm also someone's mother. And, there are some days that being someone's mother will out trump being your employee 100 times over. They're both important to me. And at the end of the day, if I quit or I die, this job will replace me. If I die, my daughter will be at a loss forevermore. She doesn't get another mother. You guys get another employee. She doesn't get another mother. And so that's how I had to prioritize. Having that conversation, figuring out what I needed out of it, I went to the interview. And I was extremely upfront about what I thought my shortcomings would be at this position and how I thought that we could work together to overcome them. What some of my ideas were for the company after I'd studied them and I figured out what they were about. I understood how long, they've had attorneys. I learned about their previous general counsel as much as I could find online, offered some of my ideas. And we had a very frank conversation. We ended up getting along. The CEO and I hit it off. It felt more like a hangout type conversation like we're having now than it did an interview. He asked me about my child. I told him all about it. He explained that he too had children and that his wife, she does work here at the company, and she is the CFO, and she's got twins. So I was like, geez, that's the only thing harder than having one is having two. Right? And so, but she's doing it. And so he understood that and he placed a lot of value on that. And so we were able to come to a consensus about what he as the employer would need out of me and what I as the employee would need out of him. And I think that conversation is ultimately what got me the job. I wasn't here to show him bells and whistles. I'm a younger attorney. I have under 10 years experience and I'm coming in as general counsel, and I knew that. And so being honest and frank with him, and also, not commanding a high salary that I haven't earned commensurate with the experience yet. I'll earn it eventually, but with the experience I have now, I just didn't feel comfortable demanding that at this time. And that's okay with him. It's okay with me. I got the job and I hit the ground running ever since. There are some days that I feel like I'm rocking it, and there's some days that I feel like my shoes are too big.
Hey, I feel like that all the time too, and I think you're lying if you say on every day, oh, I know 100% of what I'm doing 100% of the time, and even as a parent, like, I don't know, I've never done this stage of parenting before because this is my first time doing it. So you're learning along the way. I think it's owning it and just figuring it out. But I mean, I really do like your point though about going in with and being clear about your expectations and your intentions, and being honest about them and not being just a yes woman. And, I think there's a lot to be said about that. And there's a lot of importance with that, and I think it speaks to you. Like he probably really found it refreshing that you're not going to go in and BS him. Be like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do everything for you. I'll be your everything. Be like, no, I have some, restraints or demands here too. And this is what I need from you to make this relationship between us work and my relationship with this company. I think like think we should see, I wish we'd see more of that. I mean, it's like, Wendy, you do a lot of interviewing for positions at our firm, and you're like our employment center, I would say. But like, wouldn't sitting in an interview, like, do you often have potential candidates come in and like say, like as clear as like Nicole made it out to be like, I need X, this is what I need for this to work? Or is it a rarity for you?
I would say it's rare. And the way it comes across sometimes when some candidates do say that, that's rare. But what I do like what you said, Nicole, is, you not only come in, you don't just come in and start right away and be like, here's what I want, here's my limitations. I like that the part is that you said you're young. You're young and you have a very varied career. Like that's not a hindrance. It's like I've tried different things to fit the needs of my just some things in my life, but I come in with fresh ideas. I take that experience, just the stuff that you did with the networking of the attorneys at the other job, even while in COVID, like as an interviewer, those are like check, like plus, like that's awesome. And that's what you want to see. Like that's how I would come in. Like, yeah, I'm younger. I come in with these skill sets, but I have such a varied, you have a varied experience background. And I think for general counsel, especially like having the Deloitte, having that part in Planned Parenthood, how I always say this, how I got my first job in the door for my law job as the second name partner on the door. I babysat his kids.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, a while ago, I mean, the kids were older at that time, but like that, you always keep those connections in life.
Yeah.
And you never know where you go. So I think it's awesome what you've done.
Yeah. And
your daughter is very proud of you. Trust me. Coming from a child who had a single mom, like you just, that you'll remember that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I know. And I think, just to extend off of what Wendy said, like when you described your background as like your resume looks like, ADHD, I'm like, I don't see that at all, because I'm not a general counsel, but my impression is that you have to deal with everything, and it could be anything. So I see that as a benefit. You're like, yeah, tax, I got it. I know how to do tax stuff. Or regulations, I know those. Oh, I like, do you need me to litigate a file? I know about litigation. Like you can talk about so many things, and you kind of are one big package. So I see it as a strength, and I think you just need to be in the right place for them to see it as a strength as well. And you kind of found it.
Part of those ideas that I had and those conceptions, you talk to a lot of recruiters, and I've made friends with a lot of them, over time. Every time I connect with one on LinkedIn, and from time to see a lot of referrals. You got to keep recruiters in the network, because you never know where you're going to go next. But that's an idea that recruiters seem to have still on a wide scale, and it seems to be like an issue with, quote, millennials, which I am very much one of those millennial people. But millennials tend to hop around a lot, and generally employers are not in the same generation as we are. They're a generation or two behind, and there's this issue that if you jump around too much, you're not committed, or you're not focused, or you're gonna onboard and then offboard. And so that gets some of us kind of nervous about wanting to move, even if that move is a good move. So I've made a lot of moves, and there was a time where I looked at my resume and went, holy crap, someone's going to look at this and think that I'm a hopper. Right? Luckily, it worked out, because I'm in a position where, you're right, all of my varied experiences are now coming to my advantage because I see all different, no 2 days at my office are the same. I see different things every single day. It's M&A, it's commercial real estate sometimes that, we're dealing with. It's litigation, it's covenants, it's employment law. How do we do this? We've got employees in 48 states. One of them wants to take maternity leave, and there's now new PFL regulations. What do we do there? So yeah, it is very varied, and I think that's why I'm growing into it, and I like it so much. I'm not scared. I'm not turned off. I'm not, I'm never bored. I'm learning all the time. But that conception about job hopping, particularly with my generation and even the one that's graduated now, we need to maybe talk about that and say people are trying to figure out what they want, and people are trying to make it work and make those relationships work, not by yesing you to death and making promises that they can't keep, and then they become, poorly performing employees, but they're trying to figure out what they need too. This is a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And rely on your network. So, when you're saying you deal with all these varied things, and that network that you built, the last one, and as you come along, that's what they're here for. People call me all the time because they don't know employment. Like, they don't know some of these nuances, comp, litigation, or whatever. It's not about just having the file. It's like having somebody, it's a resource, like that's what we do. We're resources for people. So, and you doing that is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't until I joined the county bar and I joined like a bunch of general counsel magazines and email lists. That's where I realized, look at that. I'm a young general counsel. That's where I learned that is, getting a network and realizing that most of the people in the room were a lot older than me. But thankfully, everyone is willing to teach. Most people, if you ask them to teach you something or give you insight on something, I've had the experience. Maybe I'm one of the lucky few, but nobody has ever held back a piece of insight from me if I asked nicely. So people are willing to teach. People are willing to pass the torch.
And I think that speaks for you too. You're also always willing to learn, and I think that's a great piece of advice for anyone. Like, always be willing to learn and never feel too proud to admit that you need to tap into other people to learn from, and you don't know everything. None of us know everything. I mean, that's impossible. So you need to utilize like the resources that are available to you and your network. So
Absolutely.
we're just about out of time, but I wanted to close this since, Nicole, do you have any advice that you would give to, someone who is now sitting in similar shoes that you were, back when you're sitting at the bar exam with, with a 3-week-old newborn at home? Like, what advice would you give that woman to, keep going and keep a head on her shoulders and not get discouraged?
Oof. One, breathe. Breathe. First and foremost, and don't be afraid to assert yourself. It feels like a very desperate situation at that moment. You're under the pressure and stress of a new baby and trying to piece together a career. Don't be afraid to assert yourself, and assert your value to the profession. I wish I'd known that earlier. I wish I'd known that years ago. I'd probably be further ahead, higher up the scale somewhere, if I had believed that. And so that's something I would tell a young mom in the profession. Assert yourself, assert your value.
And know your value. I think sometimes like we are guilty of thinking we're less valuable than we are. And I think we just have to stop doing that. As easy as I make that sound, just stop doing it. But I think that is the truth. Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah. As is most things in life.
Yeah. But I mean, I didn't get ahead. I didn't get ahead until I started asking for what I needed. And that was an important lesson for me. Once I started asking and I started saying, this is what I need, I got it.
And one thing I admire about you, Nicole, too, is that you didn't give up ever, and you kept pushing for more and what worked for you and what was best for you and your daughter. And I think that I just can't say enough about that. That's amazing for you. So we went a little over. So, but that's okay. But thank you so much for joining us this morning and, talking about this. And, I really loved hearing your story. So thanks so much for sharing it. And, there's more to tell. So maybe we can have you on again and you can tell us about chapter number 2 and how things are going more in your position now.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you both for talking to me and sharing your insights. This is actually really great. This is my very first podcast. So awesome.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, this is my first one. So thank you very much. This was really fun.
Thanks, Nicole. It was nice meeting you. Put us in your network.
You.
Yes.
We'll do. Thank you.
You could call us. We're in New Jersey too.
Love it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.